My guest today is Rosa Legeno-Bell, and she is the founder of Diverse History UK and is passionate about schools implementing a diverse history curriculum whilst also meeting the national curriculum. So, as head of history at an all-boys school in Canning Town, Rosa was in the position of being able to introduce into a school with a very diverse pupil role a curricula that reflected much more of their root culture and history. And that curriculum is still active in the school 5 years after it was implemented and 3 years after she left. So she's now a consultant helping schools plan how they can teach more diverse history in their schools. So this was such an interesting topic to discuss. So let's get to the interview. So Rosa, thank you so much for joining me on the Teachers Podcast today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to join you this morning.
So we were just talking about earlier how it seems such a long time ago that we actually booked this. We're in November at the moment, but we're finally doing it. So really happy to have you here. So first of all then, how would you describe Diverse History UK to teachers who have never heard of it before?
So Diverse History UK I founded in 2020 and it's, I guess, teaching a diverse education or marginalised histories to students has been something that I've been passionate about for a long time, and that in my kind of teaching experience as head of history and associate assistant head, I've really tried to implement in any schools that I've been in. I guess I was kind of sitting there one day pondering upon this and thinking about how we can sort of make this happen on a more sort of not international, more national scale. And I thought, well, why don't I kind of be proactive about it and actually launch a company that supports schools in producing diverse curriculum material. Because I feel like my experience from talking to other educators is it's something that the majority of educators really do want to do, but may not feel confident in producing the resources or teaching the subject matter. So I guess that's where I felt that we could fit in terms of, with my experience of creating outstanding resources and my experience in a lot of these sort of marginalised histories, so we could support schools in making sure that they could implement these aspects into their curricula whilst being confident in the subject knowledge and being confident that it was, an outstanding and intellectually stimulating lesson for students.
Yeah, no, I love that, because I think you've touched on one of the things that I was thinking is that it's certainly not that teachers don't want to do it. It's often not knowing where to start or not wanting to do it wrong, to kind of have that foundation from somebody who actually has experience rather than just being like, let me just go on Google and see what I can do. And so I think that's amazing. Well done for kind of not only sort of seeing a gap in the market, but seeing how you can help, the whole of the sector in such a kind way, because you're coming from a place of, yeah, I understand that and that's not wrong. It's okay. So let's help. So
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's the plan, and it is something I'm really passionate about. So I hope people do kind of reach out to us for the support there.
Super. Right, okay, so why do you feel then that it is so important that children receive a diverse history education?
So I guess I think back to my own history education, and my history teachers at school were fabulous, which is what gave, they were part of the reason that I kind of am where I am today. So it's certainly not anything against them. It's more, I guess, the fact that I sort of realised the history curriculum that I did at GCSE hadn't changed from, my parents, kind of talking to them, and they were born in the 50s, to myself learning about it. And then when I first started out teaching, the curriculum that was taught, I know there is obviously leeway within what you teach, but generally it was the same things sort of being churned out again and again. And it's not to say that, it's not important to learn about those things, because of course World War I, World War II history is incredibly important, as is learning about aspects of the empire, dependent on how it's taught, in my opinion. So a lot of the traditional stuff is really important, but I guess where my issue is that it's not the only thing that should be taught. There are histories from marginalised groups. So, for example, let's say Black history or LGBTQ plus history, or looking at the history of mental health provision, things that are not really taught on, which are really significant and I think would speak to a lot of our young people today, because a lot of the history that is currently taught, not in all schools at all, but in many schools still, I feel is not necessarily very relevant to our students today. So I do feel that it's, in order to engage students and to make students feel that their own histories are told, it's important that as educators we really widen our horizons in terms of the subject knowledge that we're looking at and we're asking students to engage with.
Yeah, and also just fostering a love of wanting to find out more as well. I mean, we're in this age now where I look everything up, and I'm sure you do as well. I remember what it was like being 10 and wondering something, and I don't wonder anymore. I just look, and my children are the same. I mean, they're only 5 and 3, so they don't look themselves. But my 5-year-old will go, "Mummy, what so-and-so?" And I'll be like, "I don't know." And she'll go, "Can you look it up on your phone?" And I think that's the thing. We can instill this love now of it. It's not just you learn history when you're at school, but you can continue learning, because I learn parts of history most weeks. You know, I'll watch something on television and I'll be like, how much artistic license is here then? What was the real story? And or you might see, a post on Facebook and you just want some clarity, and sometimes it's not history. And so I think this is really exciting, and I think you're right, we need to, it's not necessarily even just about what we're teaching, is it? It's about instilling this love of being able to want to and find out for yourself from your own perspective what's important for you.
No, exactly. And I guess a huge part of teaching history is asking students to be critical, to think critically, and to constantly question everything, and to ask questions of any single piece of evidence, any single piece of historical evidence they look at, to ask questions of this: is this reliable? To what extent is this a valid interpretation? Where's this historian come from, or how politically was this person involved at the time? So I guess through teaching kind of lesser told narratives, or in other words, asking students to look at an angle of history that they might not have looked at before, that would really support that critical analysis. Because, an example I'd like to give here is when teaching about the Nazis, so let's say we're looking at Nazi Germany, often it will be taught that most young people, or many young people, were involved in the Hitler Youth and were kind of avid followers of the Nazis and were indoctrinated by that ideology. But then the marginalised part that I feel is not taught as much is actually there was a huge amount of young people that resisted the Nazis and that actively opposed the Nazis. And so by teaching the students both sides of the story, yes, you're teaching them something that's more in the mainstream about the Hitler Youth, but you're also teaching them actually there was a lot of young people involved in the White Rose movement who were members of the Edelweiss Pirates, who were, risking their lives to oppose and resist the Nazis. And so then that will help the students to critically think, to go, well, actually, I looked at this source. I looked at the fact that, these young people were indoctrinated and they followed the Nazis, but now I've got this evidence. So how can I use this evidence to sort of help me think about the validity of this evidence? I think it kind of will really support young people in having a more rounded historical education and will support their critical thinking.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so why are you so passionate about it then?
I guess I've been teaching for over 10 years now, and during that time I've taught in quite a few different schools. So I lived in London. I'm from London originally. I now live in Norwich. So I've taught in both London and Norwich schools, and in London the schools were hugely diverse in terms of so I guess more sort of racially and ethnically diverse, and in some of the schools I was at, we were sort of teaching this classes of 90% non-white students, almost purely white British history, and that kind of didn't sit right with me. And as an NQT, you know, you kind of sit there looking at it and thinking, but you don't necessarily do a lot about it. And as my career progressed, I ended up teaching in one school in particular that did such a fabulous job of diversifying its curricula and was teaching the students about pre-colonial Africa. So looking at, you know, the achievements and the progressive civilizations in Africa before European colonization. Was teaching about things like Indian soldiers who fought for Britain in World War One. So rather than focusing on a kind of more generally taught narrative of, you know, the white British soldiers. And I thought, this is so brilliant because this really resonates with the students. They're so engaged, and they can understand why, you know, they're getting to see a part of that. Although they're in Britain, yes, but they're getting to see a part of kind of some of their own histories. And it was that really, I thought, at that point, I realised it was something that could actually be done, and it was something that was achievable. And so I went on from there to, after this school I worked at in East London, I went on then to be head of history at another school in East London. And at that point, I completely revamped their curriculum, which was already good, but I felt it needed some further diversification. So yeah, I went in and I completely revamped their curriculum, and it was an all-boys school in East London, again, very, very diverse. And the difference in terms of the pupil engagement and how, you know, the sort of feedback that they were giving about history improved so much, and their attainment went up loads as well. And they would say to me, you know, thanks for the lesson, miss, it's so great to be learning about things that we feel is relevant to our own lives or our own ancestry. And after I left there, they've continued to, which I'm very, very pleased about, they've continued with this same, I mean, I'm sure they've changed elements of it, but they've retained this really exciting and diverse curricula in their school. So yeah, it's fabulous, and it's so rewarding to see the positive, the almost immediate, really positive effects of implementing it.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think it's important, obviously, because I can only imagine what it's like to, I don't know, have a couple of generations of your family that have been in Britain and not really know anything about the history of, you know, where your family has been. But, I mean, perhaps you do from your family, but not from school. And I was just thinking things over then as you're talking, and one of the things that I feel is interesting is it's not just about this identity of self. It's also, I suppose, I want to say about opinion or the story that's told. And so my husband's family is partly from Serbia and partly from Italy. And they seem to have a really sort of strong knowledge-based curriculum there, especially in history. And you know, what we know, say, about World War One is completely different to the story that his auntie will tell, and she's really strong in her history and she knows everything, and it's like she's in her 70s and she has not forgotten. And it's just interesting, not necessarily just from your own personal perspective, but the stories that other people will tell, and then trying to put that together and like, well, that's something and we know something. And we'll never know what the middle ground is, but it's bringing it together, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. And I think that's so important, what you said there, because I think it's kind of essential, really, that when we do teach students, that we actually be honest with them and say, you know, this is only one part of a huge story. And, you know, kids get so little time with one particular subject. So you'd never have time to teach it all to them anyway, but obviously it's very limited what you can teach them in that time. So I think to sort of remedy that is so important to say, like, we're looking at this aspect, but this is not the only side of the story. This is not the only thing that happened at this time. And so, and it's really important that kind of, that they understand from a young age, even from, you know, Key Stage 1, that there are many different sides of the story. Because I think, thinking about my education in history, you only sort of get told that once you get to your degree. And suddenly it's like, oh, hold on. Not everything that I was taught previously is, 100% truth in the whole story. Actually, there's many more sides to the story. And I think it's really important that we're honest with students about that. Because I think that supports their critical thinking as well. And if we're not teaching them to sort of question everything in history, then what are we there for, in my opinion?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I had a very similar kind of experience. And I suppose, what did my history lessons teach me? That Britain had a great past, I suppose, really. And is that really true? And then I think I was about 28 when I first went to Serbia, and I just got this massive lesson in something completely opposite. And obviously that was also very, I want to say one-sided, just like the version I'd been taught was. But, if you didn't have a history degree and you don't have a family that you've married into in Serbia, then maybe you'll never know.
No, exactly.
And that's really bad.
Yeah, exactly. And no, I completely agree. And I think that is kind of part of the ethos upon which diverse history is founded on. And actually, I just want to say I also grew up with a Serbian in my life. So I know exactly what you mean. My auntie married a Serbian man, and they would quite often have we'll call them heated debates over the realities of history. Because obviously she was brought up with an English education, he was brought up with a Serbian education, and it was interesting to see how different the narratives were that they'd sort of been brought up with. So it just, you're right, it's a really kind of good lived example of that in action, isn't it?
Yeah, and I love the discussion. Like, it's like popcorn, like, wow, this is great. Carry on, because I want to know people's opinions as well. Sometimes it's not about necessarily the truth, is it? It's about people's interpretations of the truth.
No, exactly. That's it. And this is a bit philosophical, but what is the truth anyway?
Well, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, and I suppose. Sort of the other thing that is important for diverse history is, and I understand this can be a bit controversial, but so when teaching, let's say, Black history or LGBTQ plus history, I feel it's really, really important. Yes, obviously, students need to understand the sort of the persecution and the discrimination that these groups have gone through. But it is so, so important for students to learn about the achievements and the successes of people within these groups as well. Because, let's take Black history, for example. Students learn about the slave trade. And yes, that's very important. Of course, students need to learn about that and need to understand that. But I feel really passionately that if the school is teaching about the slave trade, they also need to teach about pre-colonial Africa, to look at kind of how successful many parts of Africa were before colonialism. Or even if you're looking at abolition, yes, look at characters like Wilberforce, but also who were the Black people that were really, really influential in the abolition of slave trade. So that's kind of, I guess that's a really significant thing for Diverse History UK, is celebrating people from, historically marginalised groups, as well as looking at their persecution. Because I think it's a terrible shame if for, let's say, a student from the LGBTQ community, if they purely learn about the persecution and how that group has been downtrodden, and don't look at people like Marsha P. Johnson, who actively risk their lives to progress in rights for the LGBTQ plus community, for example. So I think it's so important for students to be able to resonate with brave and progressive and successful characters from sorry, I shouldn't call them characters, but historical characters, as well as looking at the oppression. And that's very, very important for us at Diverse History.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And, when you're in the detail of just teaching what you're teaching, you don't necessarily see the picture that you're painting over time. But then, like, when it's pointed out to you and you step back and you go, oh, what we're saying is we're only teaching, for example, when you talk about the slave trade, we're only teaching about successful white people and unsuccessful Black people. And that that's such a small part, isn't it?
Yeah, no, exactly. And I can see how that would be easy to do if, especially in primary school, you know, where you're so, as a primary school teacher, you're trying to teach outstanding lessons in about 10 different subjects, and history might not be your subject. And so you know, you have a look, you do some research, and the research that's most prevalent and easiest to come by will probably be the stuff where it shows, the unsuccessful black people in inverted commas, you know, and the successful whites in inverted commas. And so that might be the direction you go. And that's because I feel at the moment, although things are improving, but it's very difficult to find, you know, alternative narratives, if you like. And so, you know, it's not a sort of a judgment at all. I can totally see how you might end up producing a scheme of work like that. And I guess that's where we feel like we fit in. We want to be able to be easy and affordable support for schools so that doesn't always happen.
Yeah, no, and I get that, because, I mean, it's things like, I feel like it's exactly the same as getting a roofer to roof your house, because they are experienced and they have the time and they have the knowledge, and it's the same thing, isn't it?
Completely, yeah. I would really struggle doing my own roof.
yeah, so would I. Thankfully, I don't need my roof doing right now, because I've heard it's very expensive. But okay, so you're a teacher and you're listening to this podcast and you're thinking, yeah, this is really interesting. What can I do next? What are 3 actionable steps that you can just share with teachers that they can just try out really in the classrooms with their classes?
So yeah, I guess the first thing to do would be just get in touch with us to find out about how we can support you. It's completely free to get in touch with us and to have a discussion. And at the moment, we're also offering a free 3-lesson scheme of work, because, you know, we understand that people want to see, you know, the quality of our work before they can commit to things. So we're very happy to provide that, so you can see the quality of the lessons. Secondly, we really, really encourage people to, obviously in teaching, we have a lot of, you know, teacher friends from schools across the country, to get in touch with, you know, these people and just to encourage them to reinvigorate and to diversify their curricula. Because, you know, like we discussed, it really is so important, and the students are really, really grateful for it. And thirdly, if you would like to write a blog for our website on anything historical and educational, we're always very grateful for educational contributors. So please get in touch about that as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I've already recommended somebody to you, so hopefully you'll be in touch
Fabulous,
with them.
I will do.
But yeah, if you want to have your moment of fame, then get in touch with Rosa. It'd be really, really good. But also it'd be really nice, because I know that, you know, there's been a movement over the last few years, really, that's building. And so I know that there'll be lots of teachers in schools that, you know, are making waves in this area, who will be able to share their stories, which will encourage others as well. Sometimes, well, always, we always have to have those people who are willing to put the toe in the water first, and I suppose be willing to get burned and make mistakes and do it wrong and learn from that as well. So yeah, I think that was really good. I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. And how can people find out more about you?
So thank you so much for having me. It's been really, really great chatting this morning. I guess the first thing to do would be to go onto our website, which is www.diversehistory.co.uk. And on our website, you will find all the details to get in touch with us. There is a contact form that you can fill out. There are also all of our details of our social media sites, which you can follow. We would love if you followed. Or you can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm Rosa Legeno-Bell. And that's how me and Claire found each other, actually.
yeah, that's right.
Or you can email me on rosa@diversehistory.co.uk. I'd really, really love to hear from people and to kind of build the network of like-minded educators.
Yeah, super. Well, thank you so much. It's been really insightful and a lovely chat.
Yeah, thank you. I've really enjoyed it as well, Claire. Thanks very much for having me.
Thank you for listening. The Teachers Podcast